entire blocks look like this.
Yeah.
Just very poor people, man. If you take young, hungry guys and throw them a sack and put them in an abandoned house and say, go, they're gonna get money. If I shot you right now, a cops wouldn't come for 2 hours. The guy put the gun to my head and racked around in the chamber and it jammed, and I pulled out my gun and shot him. Somebody walked up and wanted her car, but decided to murder her too. So shot her in the head and killed her, fired a whole magazine at her.
Yeah.
They fired one shot, didn't hit me. So I've unleashed a whole magazine. That's Detroit, bro.
This is the Detroit that I grew up seeing images of. Yo, this is Johnny Mitchell here in Detroit. Feel like I'm about to rap battle right now. This is amazing. This is by far one of the most interesting cities in the United States. You know you're in Detroit when you're getting frisked for guns at a pizza shop. Let's go. You know you're in a working class town, by the way, Al, when all of the Ubers smell like cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like, this is Detroit. I was expecting, like, because I know about the redevelopment of Detroit. I knew about, like, all the money that was sunk into downtown. I was expecting a bunch of gentrification. I don't see it. It's still a very, you feel the working class bones of the city. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a misconception that people have been tricked into believing that they've gentrified Detroit.
GM building right here. So this is, and I think this is the border. Isn't this the underground tunnel?
Yeah, you're going in.
So right there, that is the underground tunnel that takes you across the river to Windsor, Ontario.
Yeah. That's where a lot of dope used to come in, weed from Canada.
Right.
Tons and tons of it come through that tunnel every day. It was crazy, yeah.
Wow, so that's fascinating that there used to be such an active drug traffic back and forth, which makes sense. It's literally, I could jump on a Sea-Doo and be on the other side of the river in 5 minutes.
So the guy who was bringing it in, by the way, and this is a fantastic story, this guy, his name is Chuck Thomas. I can say his name because he already got convicted and everybody knows. But he owned a garbage company, right, that took garbage over to across the border and dumped in a Canadian thing. Wow. He would load it up with thousands of pounds of weed in the back of these garbage trucks, then bring it back over every day. So it would go over to dump weed at the dump, and then it would come back and bring the weed. And eventually, I know the whole process of how he got busted. His nephew ratted him out, and it was crazy. But it sent a shockwave through the weed market because everybody was copping this really good weed from this dude. We just didn't know it was him for sure, you know?
So back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, you would say it was the Canadian bud was the best weed.
Oh yeah,
in Detroit?
Hands down,
okay.
Yeah. It wasn't even a question, bro.
Gotcha.
This stuff, once I flooded the market, my market anyways, and a lot of guys were doing it, nobody wanted any other weed. They wouldn't buy any other weed. They were just like, you know, I want that.
See, Detroit is fascinating to me because unlike most big cities in America where the urban center is, you know, that's where the most people live. Detroit is like built out. It's almost like LA.
Yeah, this is an epicenter.
Huge suburbs.
Yeah, exactly. It's built like a wheel. If you look at it on the map, it's like all the major roads all come downtown here.
Right.
They all work their way out into this massive suburbs. From the air, it's bizarre. The amount of suburbs is crazy. And, you know, it goes for 25 miles. So it's just one massive suburbs. It goes 25 miles outside of the city.
Okay, so we're in Greek Town, which is like in the heart of downtown. And the Greek people have been in Detroit for at least 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
What is the history of Greeks in Detroit?
I'm not sure how the Greeks ended up here, but there was a kind of a symbiosis between the Sicilians, Italians, and Greeks. They all kind of worked together, I'm sure, in prohibition or whatever. The Greeks established just one section of downtown, but the Mafia had a stranglehold on it. And there were guys who were Greek kind of hustlers, your own business. They'd have poker games and casino nights, and they would try to like cut the Mafia out.
Right.
And the mobsters would shake them down. In some cases, they even killed them.
Right.
You know, just to make a point. And this is a long time ago. These are stories that I've been heard and shared down.
It's interesting because the Greeks, you know, they're working class immigrants just like the Italians and the Sicilians, but they never organized into a true mafia in the United States.
No.
The way that, of course, the Italians and Sicilians did.
You would have thought, though.
But this is like, what's interesting too, the prohibition was huge in Detroit.
Oh, huge, the biggest, because they were bringing in high-end liquor from Canada.
Right.
And so they controlled.
And Canada, as we know, is right across the river.
Right across the border. So they would sneak it in a million different ways, but basically the Detroit Mafia at the time was a loose partnership of a bunch of young gangsters.
Yeah.
Basically said, listen, to Al Capone and all these New York guys, I'll get you high-end liquors from Europe or whatever.
Right.
And they were bringing it in by boat, through smuggle it in. They had a bunch of tunnels. It's very commercialized now, you know what I'm saying? It's touristy, people in town or whatever. But back in the day, it was pretty gritty, you know what I'm saying? This is where a lot of the Dagos hung out. They'd always be, you could find old wise guys in any one of these restaurants in any given day. You'd walk in there and there'd be a crew of them in there, you know, busting balls and shooting the shit. And then they were, there's a lot of churches in Detroit.
Detroit is a beautiful city, yeah. I mean, it really is like got this old, beautiful Gothic feel to it.
My great-grandfather was one of the founding fathers of the Holy Family Church. If you really want to look something up, they call that the best mafia book on Detroit, is the Holy Family Church.
So now we are getting ready. We're heading over to the neighborhood they call Eastern Market.
Yeah.
And that was the Sicilian neighborhood back in the day where, you know, the Detroit Mafia, essentially that was their headquarters. That and Grosse Point, which we're also going to go check out.
So the reason the Mafia ended up becoming like running the Eastern Market was because a lot of them started food and produce business.
Right.
And so they were basically came here and started food and produce businesses, and then they just got their headquarters there, the markets.
Yeah.
And they got their warehouses, and they'd run games and poker games, rackets, numbers, extortion, basically everything a mafia family does, but they were all headquartered in the Eastern Market.
So was this the original neighborhood that Sicilians came to when they first?
Yeah, they were all down here. Yeah, they were, but not necessarily right here. Their business, but they all lived like a mile away in the suburbs. There's a suburb, Indian Village, and another nice suburb.
Yeah.
They were all kind of down here, somewhere on the west side. So they're spread around, but there was a concentration of them down here on the east side. Most of the Sicilians worked down here, lived down here, had church down here, owned businesses down there. They all worked together. I don't care if you were a doctor or a lawyer. Everybody said, if you need a lawyer, you call the Sicilian lawyer. If you need a doctor, you call the Sicilian. And they all spoke Sicilian. They all came from Terracini, Sicily. All of them. All the family came from one little town, Terracini, Sicily. And they're all cousins and uncles and related and this.
So how does that happen? One person comes over and then tells the whole village back home, hey.
Something, one family moved here, there's opportunity, and then and so they just said, all right, and another. And
so this is where all the produce and
this is
the
your
produce markets?
Yeah, this is where everybody on the weekends goes to sell their products, you know what I'm saying? This is the pavilion. Like back in the day, my grandfather on the weekends, he'd pull his truck up there and he'd sell oranges and grape, whatever, whatever's in season.
How involved, if at all, are they today in illegal activity in Detroit?
Pretty much guaranteed that the upper echelons, I'm not going to say names, but they have their hands in municipal contracts, obviously some bid rigging stuff, construction stuff, but also there's guys who still run numbers, there's guys who still have sports books. Gambling is probably one of their biggest rackets. I'm sure some sell weed.
Can I ask you about that?
What?
What is the status of sports betting in Michigan? Is it legal yet?
I don't think it's legal yet, but they're trying to pass it.
Okay, so therefore there would be wise guys then. We're probably running sports books.
Even then, they hook you up with a loan shark, and the loan shark.
Right.
This is the Detroit that I grew up seeing images of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is, it was kind of like the Detroit of our fantasies in a way.
Or nightmares.
Our sick fantasies, right? Exactly.
This is Detroit. What I'm saying is, this used to be an automotive factory of some kind. but they've turned it into high-end, hoity-toity like studio apartments.
That's crazy.
So if you're looking around, you think you're in an abandoned factory building, when in fact there are people who are paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month to live in this.
So if I walk up into this building right here, this is a fully habitable
Art building.
But this is
There's studios in there where people live, and they're really nice too.
What was the height of Detroit, of the auto boom and the industrial
This
boom?
is in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. This building was probably built in 1940 or something.
Right. And this was like an automotive parts plant, or a,
Yeah, look at it. They made cars here.
Yeah.
You know, that was it. They pumped them out, bro. This could have been Ford or GM or whatever. And they employed a lot of people. At that time, Detroit per capita was the highest paid income in the country.
Yeah.
Because anybody, even Southern like blacks from the South were coming up here, anybody with no education, they could get a job making the modern day equivalent of like 90 grand.
right,
Just going working in a factory.
working class jobs, and then you could own a house in the suburbs.
So here's what happened.
When did all of that start to come to an end? Was it the 70s?
After the race riots in the 60s, yeah.
Right. All of these factories started to shut
Close
down
down.
as the jobs and started to get shipped overseas, and the Japanese, the foreign cars started to flood the market.
Yeah, but for 60 years or whatever it was, this was the hub of all automotive. They made all the cars. Every car you had in the street in the world basically was coming from right here.
Now, 40 years later,
Coming back.
these are artist apartments.
Yeah.
These are $2,000 studio apartments. Like this could be in downtown LA or something like that.
Yeah,
It's pretty
exactly.
crazy.
It's pretty close to downtown. It's relatively safe.
So people live in that building.
Every one of them.
It looks drafty. It looks cold as
Yeah,
fuck.
they got all the windows shut, you know.
Yeah.
Because they end up getting robbed, or they end up getting beat up, or they get something bad happens to them, and then like maybe it's not so nice to live down there. Maybe I was just an anomaly, and then a month later somebody steals their car, and they're like, yeah, I'll get another. And a month later somebody else puts a gun in their face, give me your purse. And before you know it, they're like, I'm out of here. It smells like my childhood. We had an elevator just like this in our warehouse. My grandpa's warehouse, not as big as this, but this thing cranks right here. This is how you go down. You crank this thing. That thing's like 80 years old, bro. Let's walk down here and see what we see.
So you think one of these lofts could go for $2,000 a month
Or more. Yeah, they're huge.
Oh, right. Of course, you get half a floor.
You get a building, part of a building, you know.
Now, do they own these?
That guy's getting ejected.
Who owns these buildings? Like,
Some smart businessman saying,
look at this shit. Look at how cool this is.
taxes, you got to pay taxes. The guy who bought this building probably bought it for like 100 grand.
Right.
And now he's making friggin'
back then,
500 grand a month.
I mean, the way Trump used to get the buildings back in New York in the 70s when everybody was bankrupt.
Just pay the taxes, you can have it.
Exactly. Okay, so this is like a Detroit underground rave club. Raves are huge in Detroit, which is one of the reasons ecstasy is also one of the biggest sellers
for sure
in Detroit. Is because raves are huge.
I started my own rave club and I ran it for about 2-3 months. Made a bunch of money. I could make $1,500 a night off of nitrous tanks. Just very poor people, man. It's a very poor city.
This reminds me of Buffalo and Baltimore, where you just see like big suburbs, large, small houses on big lots, a lot of abandoned lots.
Yeah, you do.
Detroit's what life is like if there weren't humans around. It's like nature overtaking civilization. How many people did Detroit lose at the beginning of the decline of the automotive industry?
It used to be like 1.3 million, and now I think it's at like 700,000.
Wow. So it's lost, basically in 50 years, it's lost over half its population.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit, look at this, look at this, look at this, get this.
Look at this, sold. It says sold on it. By the way.
That's wild.
Now look at these houses though, bro. This is Detroit, right? This is a nice Detroit house. Somebody lives in that, dude. There's an old artist, a black man, is an artist who collects all this stuff and makes art out of it. Some people buy it. He takes donations. You can come and donate money for it. He lives in that house right there. We just passed on the other side. And he's just turned this whole block into this artsy, interesting block. You know what I'm saying?
Doubt he has permits for it. Who's going to stop him? There's nobody around here. So Detroit, in the middle of all of this poverty and, deprivation, you see a lot of art and life still holding on. So it seems like if you make any certain kind of good living in Detroit, you move out. Or you go to the outskirts and get a house. It's not an apartment culture the way that New York City is, or
even LA,
even Los Angeles.
The security guards couldn't keep the robberies from happening. They couldn't keep the bad guys out. My friend's mother is a black dude. His mother was a black doctor. Pulled up to a gas station right up here on Jefferson to get her car. Somebody walked up and wanted her car, but decided to murder her too. So shot her in the head and killed her and took her car. Like, it's a woman. Like, they take her car. It was a Cadillac. I get it. But you're gonna steal. You don't shoot her in the head. So
carjacking, I've heard, is big in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it, so I'm mad to talk. But
okay, so right now we are leaving Detroit and entering Grosse Point, and I just want to show you the difference between Detroit City versus Grosse Point, the wealthy suburb. The contrast is night and day.
This is the canal, where the prohibition guys used to sneak the liquor up this canal.
Right.
So this is where I grew up. This is my little neighborhood. That house looks just like our other house, but our house is coming up right there. That's my old house right there.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. That's the house.
Wow.
And I spent 11 years in that house. Yeah, dude, we were freaking hitting these homes, bro. I'd drive a crash car, and then we'd have a box guy, a safe guy, and we'd have a couple guys would go in the house. We'd park a van in the driveway, and I'd park in the street with a police scanner, and I would sit there freaking all night. I mean, it might take them 2-3 hours to ransack a house, bro. But we had a way to beat the alarm. This neighborhood is where basically the entire mob hierarchy lived.
Okay, so we're here in Grosse Point. This is like the Beverly Hills of the Detroit area, and you can see the estates on this street are huge. They're like 10,000 foot, like acres of land with mansions sitting on top of them, and they're gorgeous.
The hierarchy of the mob basically all lived in this neighborhood. Now, not the whole mob, but the upper echelon. So we're standing in front of Jack Toco's house, the longtime boss of the Detroit Mafia for 40 years. Who was cousin of my grandfather, and we lived a few blocks away, and basically the entire upper echelons of all the Mafia lived in this neighborhood, all within a couple, maybe a square mile, that's it.
Was this a big Sicilian enclave, or was it just everybody that had money?
All the Sicilians with money lived here.
Right.
All of them. Right. All of them. So the Sicilians with money, the professionals and the executives, that's why the mob guys wanted to live amongst them. Yeah. They wanted to be amongst the elite. So the guys who had money, the top level guys, they moved out here. There's a park right at the end of the street here, and I'd go fishing, and the old men would play bocce, and they would barbecue, and they would drink wine, and they would bullshit.
If you were a boss of a family, you could safely be out here in your wealthy neighborhood, but have your finger on the pulse of what was going on in Detroit just a few streets away. Yeah,
they controlled everything, you know what I'm saying? Including the rackets in there, the garbage distribution and the contracts, and they were friends with all the people who own these businesses. These are all executives and businessmen. That's how they made their power.
And they say Toco, and this might just be Mafia lore, but they say Toco was involved in the hit on Jimmy Hoffa.
He gave the green light according to the lore. He's the one who said yes. And then they said, well, tell me your plan. And they planned it out, and he said, go.
Hoffa, as we know, disappeared in Detroit.
Outside of Detroit, but not far from here, for 10 minutes away in Birmingham, I believe it was.
Wow. All right, so we're here looking at the Grosse Point Yacht Club. Gunnar, tell us about what you and your boys used to do with the boats back in the day.
We used to sneak in there and steal them. We stole these boats. It started as a one-time thing, and I got an opportunity to keep doing it. And we would go in there, actually in the end, with little Zodiacs, and go in there and steal these boats, drive them across to Canada, and sell them for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. And then they retag them in Canada and sell them in the Canadian market for market price of $100,000, $200,000, these boats. But that's where we were getting them right there. You'd sneak in there and get them.
And were those mob guys in Canada that were receiving the boats?
They're definitely mob guys, Sicilian guys.
It seems like it would be impossible to police, especially in July with hundreds, if not thousands of boats out on this lake. It's impossible to stop every boat that's coming across.
They don't even stop a fraction of the boats. Yeah. Gee, the lake is I mean, swam in there my whole life, man, but that's rough right now.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't
So then
look...
you get to Canada?
Yeah, the Canada's on the other side.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there it is.
You can drive a boat right over there, bro. And that pisses me off because I'm like, I grew up here. Dude, listen, I had a cousin, my cousin Johnny, the crazy one. He went to Grosse Point, south and north, and he would have me come meet him at parties. And these girls that were at these parties, they looked at me like I was a pauper. When I said I was from St. Clair Shores, they wouldn't even talk to me. They're like, oh, he's a nobody from St. Clair Shores. And Johnny would have me rob their houses. So he'd like, I'm gonna distract this girl and go make out with her in her bedroom when I'm in there. Go up in her parents' room and get the gold, get the jewelry, get the money. Yeah. So I go up in these mansions, bro, and I'm ransacking these houses and pulling all the jewelry out.
Yeah.
We got in trouble for it a couple times. You know, I hit my teens. I was involved in crime. I was expelled from school. I was in the street. I wasn't mingling with people like this, bro. Had I been smart, I would have been networking with people like this.
Right.
Building a network with friends, girls, people that I knew whose parents were ballers and owned businesses. That's what smart guys do, and that's the ones that are now the billionaires and millionaires. Mm-hmm. But I was just a thug, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go steal the jewelry. Look at that house in the corner right there, bro. I think I was in that house selling dope, maybe buying dope. Right here, look at that.
Wow. So would smokers back in the day find an abandoned house like that and just turn it into a crack spot?
Guys would open, see that one over there? Guys would open houses like this, and they'd let people smoke in it. Like that apartment building right there was a prime spot.
Now, would there be shootouts in this?
All the time, bro. All the time. I got stories, bro. I've gotten shootouts in this neighborhood. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
I shot a couple mother effers in this neighborhood.
Look at that.
I got shot in the leg here, right by here. Yeah, they go down the next block. It's a mess. I told you about the time where the guy put the gun to my head and racked around in the chamber and it jammed, and I pulled out my gun and shot him. It was right here. I was on Glenwood Street, which is next couple blocks down. And dude, I was always running from the cops too, running around here, like on my Ninja. Now, a white kid on a Ninja driving in the hood. Look at this block, look at this. This is what it used to look like. Drive down there.
Wow. Okay. Now, this is what the imagery we're about to see is what I think when I picture Detroit. Like when everybody watched the show Cops back in the day, right? It would always be a scene like this in Detroit. It'd be 1 million people out, strip cars, people hanging out on stoops, and property that looked like this.
Yeah, and entire blocks look like this. Whole blocks, on and on and on, for miles, like whole neighborhoods like that. Like people still living in that house.
Yeah.
Man. And there's somebody in there, man. It's crazy. And it's sad. I mean, that's a dope house. I'm sure there's somebody selling dope. See, there's a trail up the side of it. Somebody's going in. They got to be friends with the neighbor probably, or maybe the guy owns. This is the dope dealer, and he's got a spot through there. This. Remember when I told you the story how they put the gun to my head? It was right here. They came out of that building.
Let's get that.
And I freaking got in a gun battle as I took off. I fired a whole magazine at them.
Yeah.
They fired one shot, didn't hit me, so I've unleashed a whole magazine.
This is the hood, but if you look behind me, abandoned houses like this used to be lined up on this entire street.
Whole block.
And whole blocks, whole neighborhoods, thousands and thousands of houses look like this, completely gutted and abandoned from, people that used to live in them back when Detroit was booming in the 20s through the 60s. But now, as you see on this side,
new homes.
People are coming back. Because you could pick these lots up for next to nothing, right?
Yeah.
So you buy them, put a little bit of money into it, and now you have 3 middle-class homes right next to a crack house.
Yes, it's literally next to crack. Well, I'll get into the story. This is the block that I actually almost got killed on. Down the street, I was dealing with these dudes. Long story short, I was negotiating a dope deal, and all of a sudden I heard somebody go, "Don't move, mother effer," put a gun to my head, and I looked up, and the guy had a gun like this to my head, and he goes to rack around in the chamber, and the gun jams. So I pulled my gun and shot and peel off, and then I heard a gunshot after me, so I fired a whole magazine at them. But this neighborhood, I got freaky memories here. Like
and that was in, and what you're leaving out is that was in broad daylight.
Broad daylight, Saturday afternoon. Yeah, right.
Crazy in the middle of these huge streets.
Yeah, right in the street. There's a corner a couple blocks over like this where I got jumped I got busted in the head with a baseball bat and stabbed. I see the guy 2 weeks later, he blocks me off, right? And I jump out of my car, and because he says, this ain't over. You think this is over? This ain't over. I said, all right, man. I reach for my gun, jump out of the car, and I run up on him, and he tells his boy, go, 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 go. And I dump a whole magazine into the car, running right next to him, and broad daylight. This is a perfect example if you pan this way. If this particular house here is most certainly probably a crack house or a dope house. There's probably guys in it right now going, what the frick are them guys out there doing?
Yeah.
You know, filming the house. But that's, you know, but it's right next to some nice houses.
Right.
But two guys sit in there with a couple bundles of dope all day, and the dope fiends come around the back, down the alley, and they come in, knock on the door. How many you need? Boom, boom, boom. And it's happening.
Is heroin big in
Oh, it's
Detroit?
huge. Are you kidding me, bro?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? All the kids, the white suburban kids who come from the suburbs, they come by them thousands down here to buy their dope, man.
Right.
Buy bundles every day. I need 100. I need 100. You know.
And we're just 10 minutes from Grosse Point.
Well, the rich kids come right over here, bro.
Right.
And they end up, see, the black dudes, they're cool. The dope dealers, they're like, they want to make friends with kids like that. That's, you know,
That's where the money's
all
at.
I need is 4 or 5 customers that buy 100, 200 every day, and so they treat them great. Hey, buddy,
Right.
good to see you.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
they're not trying to rob them or whatever.
of course
but
not.
then there are the ones that do try to rob you, the stick-up kids and the gangsters and the jackers,
Right.
or the guys like me who would try to jack the people going to get dope. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's how I was. So and then I go rob those guys, you know,
Right.
and kick in the door and pull a gun.
Yeah, and that's why when you were like, be careful, it's a dope house, I said, well, I'm not worried about drug dealers usually. Those are usually business people. I'm worried
Right.
about people that are rolling up trying to jack these guys and seeing us out here. You know?
Yeah, this is not a real safe place.
This is where all the crime is happening.
If I
is
shot you
downtown.
right now, a cops wouldn't come for 2 hours.
All right, let's get out of here on that.
Let's get out of here. Let's go. I was such a bad dude, man. Like I was robbing. I've robbed mother effers on every street,
Right.
dude. Every street.
So
just
look
keep
at
going
this right
straight.
here. You got the nice car in front of the abandoned house.
Yeah, that's a dope man.
Yeah.
They got a dope spot there. It's so easy to run dope. You can
Yeah.
pick any house you want.
Right.
And then look at there. If you see a little trail going behind the house into the house or down an alley, that's how they get to the dope spot. But
Hey, what's up? It's Johnny Mitchell. We're here in Detroit. You can see I'm in front of the mayor's house. It's Detroit, man. When we film, we keep the car running just in case something happens. We got to jump in and peel out. Here with my man Gunner right now.
it's just the perfect example of
Yeah.
what it looks like in Detroit. They've torn down most of these houses
Right.
like this.
Right.
But
So this is crazy. It's these streets that kingpins like Big Meech
Oh, yeah.
and the Chambers brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
And they came out of neighborhoods like this. You know?
this is what they did. They took over whole neighborhoods like this.
Right.
These houses like this, they build a string of dope houses where they'd open them up, put guys in here, give them a sack, but then they'd have 20, 30, 50, 100. At one point, I know Big Meech had like 500 guys
Right.
in like 10 different cities, you know?
Yeah.
But they would just freaking...
Well, what's interesting is they left Detroit. That's
Yeah,
how
yeah.
poor Detroit was. Even dope dealers, in order to really emerge and get on in the game, had to export the hustle
Yeah.
in certain ways.
Well, there's more money to be made. You know, there's not a lot of money here compared to, say, Atlanta or whatever. So they move around, chase the money.
Right.
But if you take young, hungry guys and throw them a sack and put them in an abandoned house and say, go, they're going to get money. And now you just, every day you got a guy who goes, here's a brick.
Yeah.
Here's a brick. And they keep chopping and making it. And then you build an empire, but eventually it all comes crumbling down.